testimony.
Well, thank you, Chairman Murphy, Ranking Member Johnson, and distinguished members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. It is my honor to appear before you today to discuss the EU's upcoming Eastern Partnership Summit and to highlight the opportunities and the challenges we face in this part of Europe. While the 6 Eastern Partnership countries have responded in different ways to the EU's offer to integrate into Europe's common structures, the United States strongly supports the process as a key ingredient in our effort to cement a Europe whole, free, and at peace, a shared policy goal of the United States and EU member states since the Berlin Wall fell almost 25 years ago. At the November 28-29 summit in Vilnius, as you said, Chairman, EU members will make decisions whether to sign an association agreement and a deep and comprehensive free trade agreement with Ukraine, and whether to initial these same agreements with Moldova and Georgia. This is a historic moment for all 3 of these countries and a key step towards their dream of one day being fully integrated into Europe. All 3 have worked very hard to bring their judicial and law enforcement structures closer to the EU standard and to prepare their political systems and their economic and energy markets for greater integration with Europe. Ukraine has passed over 18 pieces of implementing legislation harmonizing with EU standards to prepare for Vilnius. Georgia and Moldova have met the requirements for initialing their AAs and completed their respective DCFTA negotiations and embarked on key judicial sector reforms. In each case, these reforms have required a national political consensus that these countries' futures lie with Europe. The United States supports the sovereign right of these countries to choose their own future, and we welcome their closer relationship with the EU. We have been working in lockstep with our European allies and partners to help Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia meet the tough conditions for a yes vote at Vilnius. We've also been aligning future U.S. assistance with that of the EU to ensure that these countries can continue on the politically difficult but necessary path of reform and economic adjustment, including after Vilnius, where there'll still be plenty of work to do. At the same time, we've been working with the EU and each candidate country to anticipate and to prepare them for any negative reaction to their choice, whether it comes from inside or outside their countries. I would note in this regard that any form of pressure to prevent sovereign states from pursuing greater integration with the EU or any organization of their choosing would contravene obligations under the OSCE Helsinki Principles and the Charter of Paris. The message we are sending in the neighborhood is that all countries benefit when their neighbors open their markets and become more stable and prosperous, as you said, Mr. Chairman. The breadth and depth of U.S. assistance to the Eastern Partnership countries over the past 25 years is well known to this committee and to the Senate as a whole. You have been our indispensable partners in shaping our policies and our programs in support of a more democratic and prosperous Europe and Eurasia. We ask for that support to continue. In recent months, as Vilnius approaches, we have kicked our political, economic, and technical assistance into higher gear. The President gave vital political support to the Eastern Partnership Project during the Baltic Summit in Washington last August, and again when he met with his Nordic colleagues in Stockholm in September. The Vice President has discussed Eastern Partnership in all of his bilateral meetings with European leaders over the last months. Secretary Kerry underscored the strategic importance of the Eastern Partnership when he met with all of the EU foreign ministers in Vilnius in August, and again at the transatlantic dinner that he hosted in New York in September. And in the months since then, our interagency team on Europe has worked with all the parties to build consensus for the most forward-leaning outcome in Vilnius. We've met with decision makers in all of the candidate countries to drive home the need to make the tough choices and lock in the reforms before Vilnius, and to show that they're serious about their commitments. We've also been in and out of Brussels and key EU capitals on a weekly basis to fine-tune our assistance programs to ensure that they're effectively coordinated with those of the EU and that they're supportive of the needs of the countries. I'd like to briefly outline where we stand on Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. I've submitted a longer statement for the record which covers all 6 countries and those 3 in more depth. As you know, Ukraine still needs to take 3 important reform steps in order to meet the EU's conditions for signature at Vilnius. It needs to pass justice reform legislation, it needs to pass electoral reform legislation, and it needs to take action to release jailed former Prime Minister Yulia Tymoshenko for medical treatment. In the past few months, Ukraine has come under pressure from Russia, including bans on chocolate, stoppage of refrigerated goods at the border, and reductions in other key imports. We're working with the EU on options to help Ukraine make difficult trade adjustments and weather the EU implementation period if Ukraine makes the political decisions necessary to sign its association agreement at Vilnius. We're also discussing ways to broaden and deepen the U.S.-Ukrainian bilateral relationship after Ukraine meets the Vilnius conditions. Moldova's initialing of an association agreement at Vilnius has already been approved by the EU, and it's poised to attain visa liberalization from the EU as early as this spring, and to sign its AA by September of 2014 in advance of their next elections. We in the EU are working together to try to mitigate the impact of recent Russian decisions to block the import of Moldovan wine and other agricultural exports. We're also looking at steps to increase Moldova's energy security and to expand its exports to the EU and to the United States. In 2012 and 2013, Georgia took important steps forward with truly competitive national elections, resulting in the first peaceful democratic transfers of power since it regained independence. But considerable political and economic challenges remain, such as the unresolved conflicts in the 2 Russian-occupied regions of Georgia, protracted displacement of people, fragile democratic institutions, and the need for further strengthening of the rule of law. With U.S. assistance, Georgia has reoriented its trade towards Western markets and increased its energy efficiency and diversity, and we're working with the EU to strengthen Georgia's ability to resist external pressure. Finally, as you mentioned, Chairman, in our discussions with Russia about the Eastern Partnership, we are encouraging Moscow to abide by its commitments in the OSCE and elsewhere regarding the rights of its neighbors to pursue any political and economic arrangements that they choose. We've also encouraged Moscow to see the benefits of deeper integration between its neighbors' economies and the EU's 500 million customers, including the likelihood that more prosperous neighbors will buy more Russian exports. Both the EU and the United States are also interested in increasing trade with Russia, and we're open to further consultations on what might be possible. The Eastern Partnership is ultimately about far more than closer relations between the EU and several countries in Eastern Europe and the Caucasus. It's also a step towards the long-standing vision of a more integrated economic and political space, stretching from Lisbon to Donetsk, animated by market-oriented reforms, growing prosperity, and deepening democracy. We strongly support it, and I look forward to your questions.